Here at the Social Regressive, we've gotten to spend a lot of time with some very accurate long-range precision rifles. This one is a standout right here. Make sure you check out the full playlist because we've done a really fun challenge with this and we've done a full review on this rifle. This is the Savage A22 Pro Varmint, and you really need to take a close look at this if you're interested in a 22 that steps away from the traditional carbine, that's just kind of small, light, short overall. This is a real rifle. This is a long rifle, something that is going to add a lot of extra weight, very precise if you're in the prone, if you're on a bench, or if you're doing certain kinds of standing target shooting. This one gets all the right weight in all the right spots, and it's going to give you some goodies like, here with the Boyd's Pro Varmint stock, you get a more vertical grip, you get the higher comb, you get a longer length of pull. This is just a totally different experience from a lot of the other rifles that you maybe used to using, like your squirrel rifles or your little survival rifles or just your little plinkers. This one's very different. However, even though this one, as you see it configured, costs about $415 to about $450, somewhere in there, the action is going to be exactly the same with this rifle versus any of the less expensive ones that you're going to find in the catalog. This A22 action is a work of brilliance, and I want us to just dive in right here and take a close look at this again. Yeah, we checked out this action in the full review video, but I want to get just a little bit deeper to show you the genius of this thing and how no matter which A22 you buy, or the A17 or the A22 Magnum, that you are getting a piece of machinery that was just brilliantly designed. This is a real work of genius, and I'm going to show you how this works. Like I showed you in the review video, taking this rifle down in the field is really easy. All you need is a ballpoint pen or anything that can push in this little tab right here, and once you have that in just a little bit, then the back of this is going to raise up and you can pull it off. This is just a dust cover. It's plastic, nothing really special going on there, but it's nice and easy to get into the internals right here. And what this does is it exposes actually the cleaner elements of the rifle, and we're going to get into that here in a second. But right under here we have the trigger and the hammer, and then we have the guide rod and guide spring going on right back through here. To take this out of the stock first, we're going to have to remove two of the screws that we have. So we have action screw number 1 right back here. Here's the rear one, and it just sits right at the back of the tang. This is probably a pretty difficult little stock to mill out. The Boyd's folks that cut this action out, it looks like they had their work cut out for them. This one doesn't look particularly easy. Lots of little chunks in there. So there's the rear action screw with its washer, so don't lose that. I'm going to put it on my magnet back here. And then the front one is in the usual spot. And I'm going to pop the magazine out. Now everything is mostly free, but we do have to put the safety into the center position right there, and then the stock should lift right off. And there we go. There is our barreled action. This comes in kind of 3 major pieces. We have the bolt running through here and all of its parts. We have the metal action, and then we have this trigger housing right here, which is the only kind of plastic part aside from the dust cover. So let's go ahead and remove this and get it out of the way. This action is held together by a handful of pieces that are kind of interlocking, and it's very intelligent the way that this is laid out. As long as everything is assembled correctly, it holds itself together. And then once you start to remove certain key pieces, like the guide rod and spring right here, okay, so that has a little pin that just nestles inside a recess here inside the action. So that just pulls straight out. This is all captured. You don't have to worry about losing parts out in the field. And we'll just set that aside. This is looking very AK-like, I bet, to some of you guys. You have the long guide rod, the long spring, and then the fact that this is actually holding that dust cover in place is probably going to look kind of familiar. And once we've done that, we can just kind of push down on the hammer a little bit, and you can see that this is not a striker fired gun or, you know, some kind of bolt sort of gun. This one has an actual internal hammer, and it's actually a pretty good little chunk of steel you can see right there. So this should be very adequate to be able to slap that firing pin and get a good ignition. So yeah, pretty good little tension going on there. You push that down to allow the bolt to slide past. Now we can remove the charging handle, put that to the side. Now the bolt will push all the way out. You can see it kind of comes out at an angle. And there's our chunk of steel right there, very squared off. We're gonna spend a little time with that. But then yeah, back here we have all of the trigger and hammer, all of that is just housed inside this one piece. And to remove this, there's one pin holding it in place, and the guide rod was actually holding that in place. So if I turn this, it's actually gonna fall out pretty easily, but I'm gonna use a pin punch just to finish the job. There we go. That's our specialized pin right there. And then the trigger housing, we just kind of slide it forward, lift it, and it pops right out. Inside here we have the wonderful AccuTrigger where we can change the tension from 1.5 to 4 pounds, and we can keep that crispness no matter what kind of pull weight we want. Love, love, love the AccuTrigger, and this one is a better example actually of the type than even the B-22. I loved the B-22 rifle, but this one, they really nailed it. This is a very crisp pull right here. There's no creep at all, and like I say, you can get the different pull weights. There's the hammer, which is gonna look a little bit familiar to you AR guys. It actually kind of looks like an AR hammer. And all that's attached. We're not gonna take this part down. We could pull all this apart, but I hate putting triggers back together. And it's working just fine, so we're not gonna mess with it. But then up here, we have the ejector. This is kind of a fixed ejector with just a little bit of float to it, which was really smart. So that as things maybe move around inside the action, this one's always gonna be ready to kind of slide into the correct place. Right here you see this little piece of metal, this kind of flat blade running through here, and this is the bolt catch. So very simple, it's under spring tension right back in here, and that's gonna grab that bolt and keep it from sliding forward when you don't want it to. As soon as you pull the bolt back, it's just gonna fall right out of its position and allow the bolt to ride home. As for the bolt itself, this is a work of genius, and I want to shake the hand of the guy or the team at Savage that came up with this. This works in all kinds of ways that I did not expect. All right, now first off, this is just kind of a squared off chunk of steel, as you see right here. This is going to ride in grooves inside the action. The bolt rides very neatly in this action. It's very smooth overall, and there are a lot of contact points, and really this just kind of fills the entire space. You can see that there's very little wiggle as I move this bolt around. It just doesn't have much room. There's just enough to be able to keep this moving really well without getting tight in there. And one of the consequences of having this action totally filled up is that whatever 22 long rifle, carbon, grime, whatever comes out of there is all gonna stay really just in this part of the action. And that's exactly what we saw when we cleaned this rifle up. There just isn't room to get garbage either through the bolt or around it to get back into the cleaner parts of the action. The guide rod and spring were almost completely clean. And then we had the trigger housing right here that I didn't even really have to clean at all. There's still just a little bit of dirt back in there, but this is wonderfully clean, and the trigger is going to remain that nice crisp trigger pull without any kind of crud in there, just because of how clean this stays. Looking at the face of the bolt, you can see that there's really only one hole running through here, and that's the one for the firing pin. The firing pin is a long piece of steel that runs all the way from the back, and this also has very, very close, tight tolerances. So this is not going to allow crud to make it past there. Now you can see up front here that this is actually very open, very different from a lot of the other bolts that you're gonna see out there for 22s or 17s. A lot of the time there's a very small slit to allow the firing pin to come through. But this is actually just a big old chunk of steel sitting in there. This is going to be one that you're probably not going to break as easily, like a lot of rifles don't allow any kind of dry fire. But because this one is captured, and because it is this big long piece of steel that has a very limited travel, this is one that I think you don't really have to be afraid of, dry firing. Say you get to the end of your magazine and you take that final pull and it pops, you don't have to worry that you're going to break any parts off there. Here's another really smart touch by Savage. This piece of steel right here that you see sticking up, this is what actually strips the next round off the magazine. This is kind of the little feeder catch. And on a lot of 22s, this is a stamped piece of steel with a very sharp edge. And it has the effect of actually tearing up the round under the one that you just picked up. It tends to really cut into the round a lot. This one does not do that. So it's going to help to keep your bullet, the actual projectile that you're firing, in much better shape for better accuracy. And it's just not going to cause any damage overall. And while we're looking at the face, we're going to pull this firing pin out so you can see how it works and how it helps to keep everything clean. But do also take notice of this giant extractor that we have right here. This is not any kind of cheapo part that's mimed or some little bent piece of steel. This is a very solid milled steel extractor, and this is going to get the job done for many years to come. Way to go, Savage. The firing pin that you can see protruding just a little bit back here at the back of the bolt is held in place by just one roll pin. You can see right there. We're going to punch that out so you can see what's going on inside here. There we go. With the roll pin free, the firing pin should just drop right out. There we go. And you can see that this does have some spring tension to keep it from kind of remaining forward after you've fired. This is always going to return to its kind of home position. And this roll pin captures the firing pin and keeps it from moving too far. So that's how you're not going to get this slamming into the front of the kind of chamber area, so that a lot of time you get 22s, folks will say don't dry fire them because you're going to snap the end of the firing pin off. And in this case, like I said, I don't think you have to worry about it because all of this travel is kept in place by this roll pin right here. And since we do have a hammer striking this, we should have plenty of striking force. Now remember that the channel running through here, it's pretty wide overall. You can see, okay, this is the back section right here. This is where the back end of the firing pin sits. And it remains pretty wide all the way up through the front. So we do have a little bit of room to be able to accumulate just a little bit of crud, but in general, this firing pin should work as a piston to try to push things out. After a lot of shooting with this, I did notice that there was a bit of a slowdown with the firing pin. It wasn't always igniting the target ammo that we were shooting. I think that with more of the standard ammo, I didn't have any of those issues, but I think there was a little bit of a thicker cup on the Federal Gold Medal target ammo, and it just didn't have quite enough velocity to be able to hit that every time. Once this is cleaned up though, like it is, it should be fine for that target ammo. With that firing pin removed, let's take a look at the front of the bolt again. Okay, so there's that giant extractor, and this is the bolt face right here, this kind of semicircle cutout. This is where we did get some accumulation up around the edges, up in the corners. And I think this is some of the issue that we had where we couldn't extract certain rounds. I don't think we had the extractor fully over the rim on some of the ammunition that we were shooting in that last challenge, just because there was a little bit of crud built up in there. And even though the round was seated well in the chamber, it wasn't necessarily, the bolt wasn't, all the way 100% all the way forward to be able to grab it and extract it. So this is one of the areas you want to make sure that you clean. Get a toothbrush and really scrub through there to make sure the next time you go out that it's pristine and ready to go. You probably noticed this semicircle right here. It's a different color from the rest of the steel. All of this is very well blued overall. I talked about how this seems to do a very good job of resisting corrosion. And this is the full contact that we're getting on the barrel. This is a good indication that this is actually sitting very, very squarely on that barrel. I'm not seeing any kind of high spots or low spots. This just seems to connect all the way around. And that's actually pretty shocking for a semi-auto that's just held in place by one spring on one side. Now, speaking of that spring, on the back here you can see the two holes running through it. So right back here, this is the one for the firing pin, and then this one on this side is for that guide rod. So you can see that the guide rod is never going to touch any of the carbon, any of the junk going on. It fits right in there, and you can see that there's no hole on the front side. So there's nothing actually poking through. Instead, this just pushes all the way back on this this guide rod and spring, and everything just kind of stays clean back here. I wiped this down with a rag when I first took this apart after long sessions of shooting, and there was nothing to clean up, just perfectly clean. This guide rod is the actual piece that holds this charging latch in place. And it's just one of those little brilliant touches that keeps everything all neatly together while the rifle is firing. It's not going to come apart, but you don't also have to push out any weird pins or anything in order to get this either into place or to be able to remove it out in the field. It's very easy to strip this down while you're out in the field, give it a very thorough cleaning, and get it back into action. Here on the breech face, you can see that semicircle where we were connecting to the bolt. And you can see the little bit of wear going on there. Again, it is very consistent all the way around. I do see a couple little spots where it's not making full contact, and I think that actually this spot right here where it's a little bit darker. This is where the bolt is kind of cut out for the firing pin, so that kind of makes sense. But we still do have a lot of wear going on through here over this entire face, so there is just a lot of contact going on. Now it looks like I was wrong. It looks like the firing pin does have enough travel to be able to smack into the back of the action, so maybe don't dry fire it on purpose a whole bunch, but it's a semi-auto, so that last shot is pretty much always going to slam home. But yeah, I can feel a little divot carved right there. Now, if you do break the firing pin for some reason, it should be easy to replace. That's one nice thing. You should be able to get a pretty cheap replacement part from Savage. Considering the quality of steel that's going on here, I don't think that's going to be anytime soon. This should be able to handle that for a good long time to come. All around the barrel, you can see a lot of space, especially compared to some of the other 22s that I've shot. And this is where most of the crud built up. And this is actually a fine place for it to build up. Instead of keeping things here near the actual bolt face or, in some of the other moving parts, it's kind of nice to have just a little bit of a buffer here so that all of the carbon and other grit that comes from 22 can kind of build up back here. And then to clean this out, I just grabbed the toothbrush and scrubbed it all out. That's it for the A22 action. You get all of that precision in this rifle with some surprisingly simple parts, at least simple for us. I'm sure that a ton of work went into designing this and figuring out exactly which parts to put where, and the end result is something that's as simple as an AR-15 to be able to take down, or an AK. You just remove certain simple parts, and if you're out in the field, this is actually a very easy job to do. One quick reminder as you clean this up, get it reassembled and ready for action again, please use probably a very light oil like this Spartan Accuracy oil. Highly, highly recommended. This is something that stays with the action. It doesn't evaporate off, and more importantly, it doesn't gum the action up at all at any kind of temperatures. There are certain oils and greases that I've used that have really started to slow things down when it gets into the colder months, and this does not do that. It performs the same no matter what the temperature is. But yeah, do apply that to all the various parts on here, especially here across the top of the action, where you're going to get, you have at least the potential of a lot of friction with the action back in here. And if you are using that light oil, it's going to help to keep things clean, keep crud from moving backward, and it's going to make sure that everything moves very quickly. Oh, and one other thing, when you're putting the firing pin back in and reinstalling this roll pin, make sure that you get this below flush. You should not be able to feel anything sticking up through here. Otherwise, you're going to bind up your action and maybe cause some damage. That needs to be below the surface. It needs to be just below, but yeah, make sure that it is not sticking up at all. Thanks a lot for watching, guys and gals. Make sure that you like, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell especially so you can see when new videos come out. We're going to be testing some more 22s, and we have some other really fun centerfire tests coming out soon. We're going to be testing some hand loads, we're going to be testing some factory ammo, and we're going to be doing more ballistics gel tests to see how different cartridges work at real practical distances. Remember that we have been testing our gel not at the 10 yards or 25 yards that everybody shoots gel at. No, we're backing up and we are hitting these things at much longer ranges, so don't miss any of that. Thanks to everyone that has made these videos possible. Thank you to Savage for sending this rifle out for me to test. And thank you, patrons of the Destructive Arts. We have a bunch of folks that are chipping in $1 or $2 a month to keep videos like these coming so that I can get out and buy ammo and buy other supplies. You guys are keeping everything running around here. We have the Sportsman's Guide and Stan and Mary at the 338 Lapua Magnum level. We have Joseph Davis, Peter, and Mr. No Name at the 300 Win Mag level. And then we have a gob of other folks at the $1 and $2 level that are just helping in their own small way to keep all of this coming, and it really all adds up. Thanks a lot, you guys, and I'll see y'all around.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Even if you didn't like this particular content, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably something coming that's more up your alley. Check out this playlist right here. This is going to have videos in a similar vein to what you just watched. These two videos we cherry-picked for you. And finally, The Social Regressive is on Patreon. So you can become a patron of the Destructive Arts and earn some goodies while helping us to provide high-quality videos just by kicking us a few bucks a month. Thanks a bunch for your patronage.